Imsa's annual GT-only trip to VIR once again left us with lots to talk about. From a couple of fiery incidents that took race win contenders out of it, to a number of penalties, some of which impacted the podium finish. And meanwhile, the championship points leaders continued to build on their lead. This is your Michelin GT Challenge at VIR Post-Race Report. I'm gonna be really honest with you right off the bat here, and I like to think that I'm generally honest with you guys, but I do think that VIR is a criminally underrated stop on the Imsa calendar. I mean, sure, it doesn't have all the shiny lights and the prototypes like Sebring, Daytona, or Petit Le Mans have, but when it just comes to that pure racing at an old school circuit, you could put up the VIR weekend against any other on the calendar. But pushing that side and focusing in on the racing that we saw this weekend, there is a lot to talk about. And I think I want to start off with the bad from this round. Maybe putting it as the bad is not the right way to put it, but we're going to roll with that for now. So 2 minutes into this race, we had a full course yellow for a sponsor board that made its way onto the track after a car went off, I believe, threw off in the S's, and it ripped that up and tore it across the track. We've seen this a couple of times before, but really something that annoyed me about this is just how this is something that happens really ever. Like, this should not be something that we have come to mind as something that's happened multiple times in the past. Like, these full course yellows need to stop. Like, I understand that we need to have those sponsor boards there, sure, and they need to be in easily viewed places to get that exposure for the broadcast. But putting these sponsor boards a few feet off of a series of corners where we see cars routinely go off and grab the dirt, grab the grass through here, I don't know, it didn't make any sense to me. I thought this was a foolish full course yellow, not for the sponsor board being brought out onto the track, but this seems totally preventable. We've been talking about this a lot this year with preventable full course yellows, and even going back to a video that I did last year, like, what full course yellows could we truly turn into, these virtual safety cars or a virtual full course yellow type deal? And certainly this one qualifies as one, but this is one that we just shouldn't have happened in the first place. We should be sure that these sponsor boards are going to be in a spot that cars are not routinely going off the track and into, and I don't know, it bugged me off the get-go of this race. And really, at the end of the day, I guess since it was 2 minutes into the race, it was a short full course yellow, but I imagine that there would have been quite a bit more outcry if this had happened, in the last 40 minutes to go in the race. There's a full course yellow that's brought out for that, costs us a 20-minute full course yellow. I think we'd hear a lot more mourning and groaning about that. So hopefully IMSA or the track, I'm not really sure who specifies where these sponsor boards are going during the race. Hopefully we can do a bit of a better job in placing them in still very, very obvious spots for the broadcast, get those sponsors the exposure, but maybe in some spots that we're not going to have full course yellows brought out as a result of a car getting into one. Now, the only other real negative that I had to take away from this race was not the driving standards per se, but the response from race control. Was it necessary to be this strict and this harsh with the driving standards and handing out subsequent penalties? I'm not really sure that it was. We talked about it coming off of Road America. Absolutely something needed to be done. There needed to be the law laid down in the drivers' meeting, make sure that everybody was falling in line. But really early in this race, it became very obvious that race control was handing out penalties for incidents that I think we could all agree were a bit soft, and at any previous race during the season probably would not have warranted a penalty at all. We saw lots of incident responsibility penalties early on. We saw a couple of blocking penalties, which for the life of me, I tried to sit down and think about, like, when's another race this season that we saw a blocking penalty handed out, and other than part of the infamous incident that we saw at the Rolex where one of the BMWs who was lapped down was blocking one of the Corvettes fighting for the win, and I believe a blocking penalty was actually dished out in that instance. But apart from that, I can't really think of another blocking penalty that was handed out this year, and we saw a couple of them handed out in this race, including one that really affected the GTD podium finishes. You see, the 78 Forte Racing Lamborghini, who was running second at the time on the final lap, they got hit with one of those blocking penalties for blocking the 0-2-1 Ferrari, who was making a charge during that final stint, and this penalty demoted them from what would have been a second place finish, and a well-deserved second place finish in this race. They were great here, but instead they have to settle for a 12th place finish in GTD, the last place finishing GTD car. Now, where that full course wheel at the beginning was a bit of a negative, and the questionable, I guess, dishing out of penalties was a bit of a negative in this one, there were lots of positives to take away from this race. We saw some great battles in both GTD Pro and GTD, and one of the highlights of GTD Pro was a great battle at the end of the race between the number 4 Corvette and the 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari. Those two were going at it for most of the final stint. They finished really close at the end as well, and it was just a fun battle to watch unfold in the final, half hour, 40 minutes of the race. However, in GTD Pro, it was not just the Corvette and the Ferrari going at it this race. We saw plenty of cars coming and going, different contenders at different points in the race as well. We saw the two Paul Miller Racing BMWs really take control of this race early, and it looked like early on they were going to be the cars to beat. They would ultimately go on to lose some track position during the first pit stop of the race, and then later the 48 would end up retiring from the race in a bit of a fiery exit, but some great battles there in GTD Pro. Speaking of fiery exits though, and it was definitely the scariest incident of this race, one that we're going to be remembering and probably talking about for a long time, came with around 40 minutes to go in the race, and here the 45 Wayne Taylor Racing Lamborghini had something break, possibly fuel line related based on the fire that ensued, although the team has yet to officially confirm anything, but it caused the car with driver Danny Formel at the wheel to become engulfed in flames as it slid across the track and into the barrier. Now, luckily, Formel was able to get himself out of the car very, very quickly and get to safety, or this could have been much, much worse. Thankfully, Formel escaped with just minor burns to his nose and lips, and he expects to be back in the car testing next week in the lead up to the Indy race. Now, while that fiery crash may have overshadowed some of what we saw in the GTD Pro class, there was also some great battles going on here as well throughout the race. The Ferrari entries came out strong here with the 021 Triarci Ferrari. They ended up finishing second place after the 78th penalty, and they were in the running for the win in the final laps of that race. Of course, I already touched on the 78 Lamborghini. They led 28 laps in this race, and they were legitimate threats there at the end of the race. And both the 021 and 78 were trying to chase down the Windward Racing Mercedes, who had their ups and downs all weekend, but ultimately they would be the ones to pull out the win in GTD. Russell Ward and Philippe Ellis led the final 25 laps of the race en route to their third win of the season. The 021 Ferrari and 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin would go on to round out the podium. Meanwhile, in GTD, it was the number 31 Corvette Racing by Pratt Miller Motorsports' number 3 of Antonio Garcia and Alex Sims taking their first win of the season after leading 41 of the race's 81 laps. They narrowly beat out the number 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari by just over a second, with the number 4 Corvette rounding out the podium. Now, before we get to the support series results, I just want to give a big thank you to sponsor of all of these post-race recaps for the entire season, and that's Paddock Focus Photography Workshops. You're already familiar with the incredible work that Paddock Focus co-host Jamey Price puts out. His work is featured heavily here on the channel, and now you can learn from him and fellow photographer Drew Gibson from the comfort of your home. Everything from how to become a motorsports photographer, track-specific guides if you're going to be attending a race with your camera. There's a bunch of great workshops at Paddock Focus, and all Off in the S's viewers can get 10% off any of the workshops when you use promo code S's at checkout. That's promo code S's at paddockfocus.teachable.com, or you can click the link in the description. Once again, a huge thank you to Paddock Focus for supporting the show. Now, there were quite a few support series races to get into this weekend. It starts off with the Michelin Pilot Challenge. Their 2-hour race was won in the GS class by Luca Mars and Jan Halen for RS1, while meanwhile in TCR it was Luke Rumberg and Jaden Conwright who won for RVA Graphic Motorsports by Speed Syndicate. it in their first win of the season. In the VP Sports Car Challenge, they had 3 rounds this weekend after a makeup round for Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. In the LMP3 class, it was swept all 3 races by Valentino Catalano. It was also a sweep in the GTDX class with Jake Walker winning all 3 races there. And in GSX, it was Stephen Clemens winning race 1 with Kiko Porto winning race 2 as well as the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park makeup round. The Whelen Mazda MX-5 Cup was present at VIR, and there it was Jeremy Fletcher who swept the race wins, while the top finishing female honors went to Sally Mott in race 1, and in race 2 it was Charlotte Trainer. Finally, in the Mustang Challenge, it was Robert Noaker who swept both races for the Dark Horse class, and in the Dark Horse Legends division, Zachary Lee won race 1 with Tom Tate taking the win in race 2. Let's take a look at the point standings now, presented by P1 Web Development. If you're a race team, driver, chassis builder, or engine shop who takes racing seriously, but your online presence is an afterthought, then you're leaving money on the table. P1 builds sites that gets you noticed, get you sponsors, and gets your business taken seriously. You can visit the new P1 website at p1webdevelopment.com or click the link in the description. It has become basically a 2-horse race in GTD Pro, with the number 3 by Pratt Miller Motorsports taking the win at VIR and extending their points lead to 2,632 points, which is a 53-point advantage over the number 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari. The 77 AO Racing Porsche lost some ground with a mediocre result at VIR and now find themselves 191 points back, with the number 64 Ford Multimatic Motorsports Mustang and the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW rounding out the top 5. In GTD, Windward Racing extended their points lead as well with the win, and they now have 2,529 points. That is a 171 point advantage over the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, with the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW, and the number 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche rounding out the top 5. Next up on the Imsa calendar, they head to Indianapolis for the Battle on the Bricks. Until then, though, you can check out this video on BMW and Team RLL parting ways in the GTP class at the end of the season. Huge shout out to all of the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes or click that join button below. Once again, though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.